بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعليه الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islamic Perspectives, a program that is geared towards educating our youth in regards to Islam, in regards to look into the challenges that the Muslims face and attend to these challenges on the basis of knowledge and understanding. We've been with you for quite some time now. We have looked at what Islam really means to begin with, as Islam is a way of life. Islam is something that is all inclusive. Islam is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants man to live full, with full potential that he has as a human being, and to make his life the best in this dunya and also in the hereafter. We kind of look into how the Islamic science is also developed in our last program in detail, and one of the branches of the Islamic sciences is also jurisprudence, which is known as fiqh. The history of jurisprudence is as long as the history of Quran itself, because the Islamic law, which is known as the jurisprudence of fiqh, is based upon the Quran. Now, tonight's program, we would like to look into the historical development of fiqh within Islam, as we looked at in our previous program under the title of the Islamic sciences. We looked at how medicine developed, how philosophy, how theology developed, and we pointed out too that Islam is not just a religion, but it's a civilization that have really pointed out, that have really extensively provided humanity with a perspective with a perspective that a man could fully benefit from this world. Now, tonight's program, before getting into more detail of our previous program and confuse our viewers, we would begin by discussing Islamic law or fiqh and how this science is really developed. As we said that the very Sharia itself is nothing but the embodiment of the will of God, and the manifestation of the will of God Himself, and the way God really wants a human being to function on this earth. So therefore fiqh, the law, really goes back to the Quran itself, the beginning of the Quran till the end of the Quran, and after that the second reality, or the second canon, if you want to call, of the Islamic law would be the Sunnah, as they say, would be the teachings of the Prophet. Within this Shia school, obviously, there is an extension of this Sunnah, which includes the Imams as well, the infallible Imams as well. So the basis becomes the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, further developed by the jurist or by the fuqaha of the time, after the occultation, which is the last Imam, the 12th Shia Imam who went into hiding, is the consensus, which means that a norm, or which we call the ijma, and this is well accepted by the Ahl Sunnah school as well, ijma, on the basis that they say that there will be no ijma of my ummah upon something that is wrong. So therefore the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they also accept consensus, which means ijma as well. However, the methodology that they accept consensus is very different to the methodology that the Shias accept consensus. The basis of the consensus, which means ijma for the Shias, is because of the presence of the representative of God, which is, they call it the Imam Masoom, the infallible Imam, and his silence becomes the very reason of this consensus. Reason of this consensus, meaning that as a proof, as a hujjat, as a proof to be used to make law. And then there's another sort of principle, which is the intellect, which we'll look into a bit detail as we move along. So therefore the fiqh, which the Quran have clearly emphasized in Surah Tawbah, that why not an individual go and educate himself. They do tafaqquh fi din, they have educate themselves and have a profound understanding, which means tafaqquh in religion, and then come back and preach to the others. So the term itself, if you look at the jurist or the fuqaha, was referred to the educated companions of the imams. This word we do not really find this word among the during the lifetime of the imams, because during the lifetime of the Prophet, however, Prophet have emphasized the lofty station of the fuqaha and how great it is really to kind of come near to God. So therefore we have this term faqih being used by the during the time of the Imam. For example, you have the letter of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, where he sends it to Habib ibn Mazahir, and where he kind of addresses him as what a great faqih you are to Habib, and invites him. So the term faqih was used during the lifetime of the Imams themselves. So we have this term being used. So now when we look at the development of fiqh among the ummah, among the Muslims, we find that certain dedicated scholars who dedicated themselves to law, they teach and they learn and they propagated it. And in certain issues where they get stuck with, they develop the sciences called the principle of jurisprudence, which is known as the principle of fiqh, the principles that are used in fiqh. The first individual to write such a treaty was among the Sunnis, is known as the Imam Shafi'i. He was the one to write on usul fiqh. Then obviously during the lifetime of the Imams as well, we have many companions who have written treatises on fiqh. Undoubtedly we have Hisham ibn Hakam, who wrote on alfaz, something on words, so which points out to the development of the principles of jurisprudence during the lifetime of the Imam, that they extracted laws based upon the teachings, based upon the Quran, where the Imams, they themselves, because as they were in house arrest, as they were far from those who follow them, they kind of executed the representatives to attend to the needs of the Shias, of the followers, and pass verdict. It was something that was practiced during the time of the Imams themselves. Just a reminder to our viewers, our lines are open. They can call us as well if they have any questions in regards to the topics that we are discussing, or if there be any other question as well. So now we will just look at a very brief history of jurist during the period from the minor occultation to the present time, if possible. The reason we are looking at is to really point out to that how rich the Islamic law is and how it has been protected from the times of the Imam by the scholars up until now. So it points out to the authenticity and to the richness of our Islamic law, and how it has been further developed in certain frontiers, in certain issues that the fiqh was faced with the society, and the society that is always fluid and that is always changing, but Sharia that is always remains the same.
So how it adapted to the newer situation. So if you look at the minor occultation period, you find which was the era between 874 current era to 941 current era. We are in 2016 now. So from 874 to 941, it is considered as the minor occultation. During this minor occultation, the Imam of the time appointed 4 deputies. It was Usman ibn Sa'd al-Asadi, who was the representative, a khas, a peculiar, a special representative appointed by the Imam, and he was in touch with the Imam. If there be any questions, if there be any letters, if anything needs to be addressed to the community, to the Muslim Ummah, it was through this individual, it was through this deputy, who was the deputy of the Imam from 873 current era to 880 current era. So that was about 7-year period. He was the deputy of the Imam. Then after him, it was his son, who was known as Abu Ja'far, Muhammad ibn Usman, who was the deputy from 880 current era to 917. So that is about 37-year period. He was the deputy. So if there be any issues that relates with fiqh, with law, or any issues in regards to the belief system, it was referred to this personality, Abu Ja'far, and he would relate it to the Imam. If there be any letters, it was given to him, and he takes the letters, he meets the Imam, he delivers the letters, or anything that has been given to be given to the Imam, and then any replies from the Imam will be given to him, and then he will come and distribute the replies or letters or address the needs of the community. Then after him, you have Abu al-Qasim al-Hussein ibn Ruh Nawbakhti, who came as the deputy from 1917 current era to 938 current era. So he was the deputy from 17 to 38. So that's another 21-year period. He was the deputy. Now, within this period of the minor occultation, you have other scholars who were alive and who were constantly active in propagating and protecting the law, attending to the needs of the people, such as Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Yaqub ibn Ishaq al-Kulaini, who was basically one of the faqih, one of the individual who wrote the famous work, or who compiled the famous work, which is known as Usul-e-Kafi. So he lived during that period of minor occultation, and his work, his hadith, his books are with us today. There was another personality who was known as Ibn Hassan ibn Abi Aqil al-Omani, who was the one who basically standardized the Imamian law, and he was the contemporary to Kulaini. So he was one of the Usuli thought. Then you have Ali ibn Babawayh Qummi, who died in 939 current era, which is obviously before the end of the minor occultation, which is 941 current era. That's where it kind of begins of the major occultation. So you have Ali ibn Babawayh Qummi, who was the father of Sheikh Saduq. So the first book that we have is considered to be the authority in the Shia school of thought, which is Usul-e-Kafi, which is written by Kulaini, who lived during the minor occultation. Then you have the second book, which is quite famous, of Sheikh Saduq, Man la Yahzarul Faqih, which is considered, because the Shias, they have 4 major books. Usul-e-Kafi, Furu-e-Kafi, Man la Yahzarul Faqih, and Istibsar. Usul and Furu is of Kulaini, and Man la Yahzarul Faqih is of Sheikh Saduq, who is the son of Ali ibn Babawayh Qummi. Ali ibn Babawayh Qummi, it has been mentioned that he had no children, and he came to Imam Hassan Askari, and he prayed for Ali ibn Babawayh to have a son, and it was Saduq who becomes the son. So Ali ibn Babawayh attended the service of the Imam, and his grave is in Qom, which is opposite to the Haram of Hazrat Masuma Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, next to the Madrasa of Ayatollah Gul Paigani. You would find his grave there. So he was living at that time. The fiqh and his books we have today of Ali ibn Babawayh. Then you have Ayyashi Samarkandi, who was considered to be contemporary to Ali ibn Babawayh and studied under 32 teachers. And many of his teachers were companion of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. And he trained about 39 students. And their names are mentioned in the books. So Ayyashi Samarkandi, who was also considered to be a jurist, and he wrote a books, and his students as well. His books are available, and the famous what he's famous is in tafsir. Allama Tabatabai refers to him as one of the first mufassir, one of the early mufassirs, exegetes, and he was also a jurist. And he studied under the companions of the Imam. So from one side you have the scholars who were the companions of the Imam training other scholars, and from the other side you have these four representatives fulfilling their responsibility as well, and other scholars fulfilling their responsibility as well towards fiqh. So finally, after this four naibin, that period sort of ends. You have the scholars taking care of the issues in regards to fiqh, in regards to ideology. Then you have Ibn Jamid Askafi, who died in 991, who was the teacher of Sheikh Mufid, and we have about 50 risalas that comes from Ibn Jamid, and his works are even a point of focus today. Now, if you look at these scholars, they were very dedicated, and they were protecting the hadith and riwayat and the methodology of the companions and of the imams in regards to fiqh, in regards to the Islamic law. Now, it was quite interesting to see that while this knowledge and this sciences was well protected, well guarded, and universities were established, students were trained, and at the same time, in regards to the political development in the Muslim nations, where, for example, you have the Fatimid dynasty, the Fatimiyun, who were Shias, but 6 Imami Shias. So this points out to the period where there is sort of a soft corner, a room, a space for the Shia scholars to really develop, to really train, to educate, to practice freely, because during the period of the Abbasids, they were persecuted. During the periods of the Umayyun, they were persecuted. But during the periods of Fatimid, which begins from 909 current era, and which lasted for 100, over a century, almost 200 years, from 909 current era to 1172 current era. So we are looking at the Fatimid period from 909, and we know that the minor occultation, which started during 874, so to 941 it runs. So it is during the Fatimid period we are looking at that this sort of development happened. And then the Fatimiyun, they were from the northern part of Africa, the western parts of present Saudi Arabia. They had a massive piece of land, known as the Shias as well, dynasty, Fatimiyun. However, there were sort of issues with that, with their belief system. One of them proclaimed himself to Imam Mahdi, and then he came to power. And we are not talking about that, but we are trying to look at what was the political framework in which there was some sort of room, some sort of soft corner for the Shia ideology to really develop more further. Then you have, this is the northern part of Africa, western parts of Saudi Arabia. Then you have the Buyid dynasty. The Buyid dynasty, present Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Syria, Oman, UAE, Turkey, Afghanistan, parts of Pakistan, from the period of 934 current era to 1062 AD or current era. So it's quite a long period, over 100 years, 130 years. Buyid dynasty came to power in Iraq and in Iran. And Buyid dynasty was a Shia dynasty. As it was a Shia dynasty, it has utmost amount of respect for the Shia scholars. And as a matter of fact, it was in Buyid dynasty where the tradition of Ashura started. And it was the Buyid dynasty in which the first Jashan, the first Milad program, if you want to call, of Eid Ghadir took place. So the traditions that we have today in regards to the Jashan, in regards to Milad, in regards to procession of Muharram, so on and so forth, it started during the Buyid dynasty. Buyid dynasty was a Shia dynasty, and as this person, there were 4 brothers who were part of the Iranian sort of dynasty at that time, and then eventually they came to power. And they took over parts of Iran and Iraq. And now when they were in power, the Baghdad becomes the center of education. Now, right after, as it becomes the center of education from 934 to 1062, we have great scholars during this period who protected the fiqh, who protected the ideology and ahkam and theology. For example, you have Sheikh Mufid in Baghdad, to the extent that his recommendation was of great value during near the kings, near those ministry. His recommendation was of great value. So now you have Sheikh Mufid in Baghdad, center of education. Then Sheikh Mufid is the one who revolutionized the fiqh by the utilization of intellect. Sheikh Mufid was the student of Ibn Jamid. Ibn Jamid tends to have an approach of using qiyas, more compared to intellect. But then you have Sheikh Mufid who kind of looked into and kind of revolutionized the whole fiqh. And he was the founding father of the usuli thought. And as a matter of fact, if you look at Sheikh Mufid and Sheikh Saduq, they were contemporary. And we have mentioned when we were talking about theology that it was these two individuals who made the infallibility as the doctrine. They were responsible to make the infallibility of the Imam as a doctrine for the Shia belief system, for the Shia ideology. So from there onwards, it became clear that the Shias are the one who believe in the ismat of the Imams. It doesn't mean that the ismat or the concept of infallibility did not exist before these scholars. No, they just compiled and they came up with the idea to really make it part and parcel of the belief system of those who are Shias. They believe in this, and this is the doctrine that they have to believe in. I think we have reached the point of break, so we will take a short break and then we will try to continue from the life of Sheikh Mufid and how he trained Sayyid Murtaza and Sayyid Razi and those students, inshallah. We will stay with us. Spiritual Perspectives will be right back after this short break. Thank you very much.